Round it up, swashbucklers. You're listening to Under the Crossbones, episode number 18. My name is Phil Johnson. I'm your host for the show. Thank you very much for listening, wherever you might be doing that, whether you're driving or running or avoiding your work, whatever you're supposed to be doing. Instead, you're listening to Awesome Pirate Dog. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. We're just past Thanksgiving. If you're one of my U.S. listeners, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. If you are listening from outside of the U.S. in another lovely country, I hope that you took advantage of Thanksgiving anyway as a reason to eat until your pants exploded. Because really, do we need a reason to do that? We don't. I mean, we could do it anytime we want, but Thanksgiving seems like a good enough reason to do it because that's what we do. We give thanks and we eat till our pants explode. And then we go shopping, apparently. That seems to be the thing. Every year, I try to avoid malls on Black Friday, and somehow I didn't this year. But we didn't actually shop. We just went to eat because we have like a coupon book thing. I know, this is going to be stupid. We have like a coupon book thing that we get every year, and we always get to December right before all the coupons are going to expire, and we go, oh my gosh, we haven't used our coupons enough yet. And then we go and we just spend like a day eating. So that day eating was spent a couple hours at the mall eating pretzels and what else did we have? Various other things. We had some cheesesteak and such. So it was we spent 2 days eating until our pants exploded. That's what we did. That's my Black Friday. That's my Black Friday. And it was also Black Saturday when I stepped on the scale. That was not a happy step onto the scale, but that's okay. If you came out to on the show today, I got a doozy for you today. My guest on the show today is John Amrhein. And John Amrhein, he's a historian, a writer. He has a website and a book called Treasure Island: The Untold Story. And what we're going to be talking about today is in John's purview, according to his research, he knows the backstory of the real events that led up to the writing of Treasure Island. It's really interesting. I think you're going to really dig this interview. You're not going to hear a lot from me during this interview because I say, tell us the story, John, and he goes to town. He's a storyteller, so you're going to hear the story today. It's very, very interesting. I think you're going to like it. And, of course, you can find him at treasureislandtheuntoldstory.com. So all sorts of stuff happened this week. Like I was coming back, as if you're listening to the last couple episodes, I was on tour in the Midwest. I was coming home, and as I landed in the Las Vegas airport for a short layover, my cell phone died. The screen just went kablooey, gone, all done, that's all. And you don't know, I mean, we're all attached to our cell phones. If you're not, congratulations, you are a hero. I do everything with my cell phone, and I had no cell phone for like 5 days, and it was a holiday, and I didn't buy a new one. I got a refurb because I'm cheap, and it was half the price. But I got a refurb, so I had to wait for it to come, and there was a holiday, and it took forever, and I went like 5 days with no cell phone, which meant I had to think about, I have to go check my email on my laptop and things. It was so... yeesh, like I couldn't, it was weird not having like a computer, like a supercomputer in my pocket at all times, right? Because that's modern life. We have a supercomputer in our pocket, and not having my supercomputer in my pocket, probably sterilizing me, was a weird experience. And I kept reaching for it because there was something I was going to do with it, and I had to find alternate ways of doing that. I had to use a kitchen timer at one point. Which I haven't used in quite a while because I use everything on my phone. So I finally got a phone. I got a phone. I'm back to normal. If you need to contact me, that I can be contacted once again, which is a fantastic thing. Thanks everybody who came out to the show at the Englander in San Leandro, California, last Saturday night. It was an odd show. Odd show. Sold out, which was fantastic. Without getting too far into the minutiae of how a comedy audience works, because I could talk about this forever, but it was an odd crowd. It was a crowd that was not glued together. It was a crowd that you'd hit, like a joke would hit half the room, the next joke would hit the other half of the room, and the show went on a little bit too long before I even got to the stage. Some of the acts on stage were there was a guy who, it was his first time doing comedy, and he brought half the room. He sold half the tickets for the room. So, and I was not producing the show. I was just there to close it out. And it was questionable, we might say, but it was his first time. So that's completely understandable. He made some odd creative choices. The result of that was that I had to work really hard to pull everything back together at the end of the show. And I have a mantra in shows like that. My mantra is just keep talking. And that's what I did. I just kept talking and just pounding the audience with jokes until they finally submitted to my genius. But it turned out to be a fun show. It was one of those that took some work to get through. But I love it. I wouldn't want to not do it. So there you go. That's how it is. Speaking of shows, I got some coming up this week. I just have one coming up this week, actually. Saturday, December the 5th, I will be at the Cynic Cave in San Francisco, California, which is a really cool little tiny basement club in San Francisco, California. Holds like 12 people, like literally. So if you want to come to that, make sure to get there early. Wednesday, December the 9th, I will be headlining at the Mill Casino in Coos Bay, Oregon. Going to drive to Oregon for one night. That'll be fun. Thursday, December the 17th, I will be at Trek Wine in Novato, California. That is a really great show. Beautiful room. We're playing in the what do they call it? The aging room where all the wine casks are. So it smells super winey. Kind of looks like a pirate's den. It's a great show. So that's Trek Wine, December 17th. And then Friday, December the 18th, I will be at the Rendezvous Wine Bar in Campbell, California, headlining that show as well. Light month. I'm also doing a couple of privates and some corporates and things like that, but that's the way that goes. So we got lots of cool stuff on the show today. Like I said, we're going to talk to John Amrhein. I got a couple other things for you. Let's see. Where should we go? I've been reading. I got two good books I want to tell you guys about. They're not pirate books. Besides all this, I've been my next stand-up special is going to be a lot of futurism type of topics. So I've been deep into futurism, Ray Kurzweil, that type of stuff. And there's two books that I thought you might find really, really interesting if you're into that at all. There's one called Tomorrowland by Stephen Kotler. It's not a Disneyland thing. I don't know why he called it Tomorrowland. It has nothing to do with Disneyland. But it's called Tomorrowland by Stephen Kotler. And it is a collection of essays that he's written about really cool futurism type ideas about maintaining like longer ages, like people are going to live longer, and bionic body parts and all computer stuff, and where wireless technology is going, and just like really neat stuff, right? The other book I've read is called Future Crimes by Mark Goodman, and it is the same topics, but all of them going danger, 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 danger. It's about how, like, I just saw a thing today where your TV can send ultrasonic sounds to your phone and collect all your personal information, right? So it's like all the bad part of all this futurism stuff, which is all going to be there, right? The good stuff and the bad stuff. We have a supercomputer in our pocket now, but it's stealing our identities. So you have to, there's the good and the bad. There's the good and the bad. And I will tell you this, there's a thing that I got, identity theft is always a big problem. I've had identity theft problems in the past. People have stolen my credit card numbers and things like that. It's a pain in the butt, but there is a thing called LifeLock. If you don't know LifeLock, they go out and they keep track of all, like if anybody opens a credit card in your name, or if somebody tries to register as a sex offender in your neighborhood, but they like use your name or something like that, right? They protect your identity. And if you don't have LifeLock, it's super cheap. It's totally worth doing. I got a deal for you guys. If you go to underthecrossbones.com/LifeLock, you can get 10% off. And it's a great deal. And the pirates are out there. These are the modern pirates that we're dealing with, right? And it's not eye patch and a peg leg, man. They got computers, and they're dangerous. So if you want to protect yourself from the modern pirates, go to underthecrossbones.com/LifeLock and get yourself 10% off LifeLock. That is a definite good thing that you should do there. I got a freebie for you. If you've been to the Under the Crossbones website, you may have seen that I give away a copy. You can get an ebook copy of Alexander Exquemelin's Pirates of Panama, which is one of the seminal research books for, Golden Age pirate stuff. It's a really, really, really cool book, and I can give you a free ebook version of that, okay? Now, a lot of times you hear this while you're driving or whatever, and you don't have time to go to the website, or you forget or whatever. Easy deal. Here's what we do. I set up a new thing. If you text the word pirate, I think you can remember that. Text the word pirate and your email address to 94253. Okay? And you'll get a thing, it'll click back, you'll get a link to download the ebook right to your phone. Super easy. So that you text the word pirate, space, your email address to 94253. Okay? And that's how you get the ebook without having to go to the website at all. I set that up just for you. And if you want to support the show, you guys are doing great. We're getting the downloads were way through the roof. We had like a 33% increase in downloads this month. Super great. Keep telling your friends. Make sure you're subscribed. If you want to help support the show, you can go to underthecrossbones.com/support. There you can make it just a donation. Just a donation through PayPal, real super easy. You can use your credit card. There's an Amazon banner there. If you click the Amazon banner, I get a little cut of whatever you buy. It doesn't change your cost at all. Really easy way to support the show that doesn't cost you anything. Or if you want to be a sponsor of the show, sponsorship rates right now are stupid low, and because I want to get some people in, and so if you want to be a sponsor of the show, very cheap to do. Just go to underthecrossbones.com/support. And that's how you get in on all the magic. All right, so let's get to this interview with John Amrhein. After that, we'll hear some music and some comedy, and I'll tell you about that then. All right, enjoy this very deep and long story from John Amrhein from Treasure Island, the Untold Story.com. Enjoy. So you have a book and a website called the Treasure Island, the Untold Story. Which I have not, unfortunately, had a chance to read yet, and I really want to. But give us the dime store tour of what you're doing here.
Okay. In 1750, a fleet of Spanish ships that left Cuba heading back to Spain was caught up in a hurricane and scattered from North Carolina to Virginia. And some of the ships didn't sink, some did. The case of the Treasure Island story, a Spanish galleon called the Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe didn't wreck, but it arrived at Ocracoke Inlet after the storm, totally disabled, came to anchor, and then they needed help. And the people left the ship, walked north up the beach about 15 miles, and found Ocracoke Inlet, where the pilot that would escort vessels in and out of the harbor came to their assistance. And what he did, and they towed the Guadalupe back to Ocracoke, and then it was anchored inside safely in the harbor. Now, where it anchored is a place called Teach's Hole, and that's where Blackbeard, also known as Edward Teach, was killed in 1718.
Right.
So here they sat. The Spanish captain was like, he didn't know quite what to do because the war had just ended between Spain and England. And the local people hated the Spanish because only several years before, they had been to Ocracoke and were killing their cattle and shooting up the place and terrorizing the English inhabitants. So they wanted to get the money. The customs people, they wanted to seize the money. And there was several groups of mariners in the harbor there that were plotting to get the money. Now, just after the hurricane, a sloop left Hampton Roads, Virginia, headed for St. Kitts. On board were two brothers, John Lloyd and Owen Lloyd, and the purpose of their trip was to reunite at St. Kitts with Owen's wife, who had left him while he was living there at Hampton, Virginia. He was on hard times because of the war, and the Spaniards had stolen his sloop. I say stolen, they seized it. During wartime, it was legal, and they condemned it and kept it. Prior to that, John Lloyd had lost his leg from cannon shot in the war and was wearing a wooden leg. And he was married, but he left his wife behind and was going with Owen to St. Kitts. These guys were not pirates. They were merchant seamen. They'd come out of the British Navy years before as midshipmen, but then when there wasn't any war going on, they didn't need to stay in, so they got out. So anyway, the sloop sprung a leak, and they headed for Ocracoke. And it just so happens that Ocracoke was familiar to Owen, and they made it in there. Sloop sank, and then they decided, well, we need to get a ride on the St. Kitts. Well, nobody was leaving because the galleon was there. So the Spanish captain needed help. He hired these two sloops that came in. One was from Massachusetts, and the other one was from New Jersey. And they were merchants, trading back and forth with New England. So he hired them to carry 100 chests of silver from Ocracoke to Norfolk, so that then can be shipped over to Spain. And so they unloaded the treasure on these two sloops. The two sloops were tied up right next to the galleon at anchor. And officers from New Bern, the capital of North Carolina at the time, called up the captain and said, the governor wants to see you in New Bern. What's going on here? He's breaking customs rules and buying and selling stuff without, the proper papers. And so he left. And when he left, the two brothers, Owen and John, had a plan. John went on one sloop, Owen went on the other. They watched the tide, the winds. They knew the sequence, and they knew the right time to up anchor and sail away. Mm-hmm. The Spaniards would have lunch aboard the galleon. They would leave the sloops, so they were somewhat unguarded. So we did it at lunchtime when they were aboard at 2 o'clock on October 20th, 1750. They hauled. Now, Owen cleared the inlet. John's sloop ran aground and he was captured. But before he could be interrogated by the governor of North Carolina and the Spanish captain, somebody slipped him a pistol, he and the other guys, on his sloop, and they shot one of the Spaniards and they got away. And he went back to Norfolk and lived a normal life for a while. And then Owen, he made it to the Virgin Islands. He was on the way to St. Kitts, but he had to stop for supplies. But they had a couple of other guys that had jumped on board at the last minute who also wanted to steal the treasure. And the head of that group was a guy named William Blackstock. And what's interesting about him, he had one eye, and he probably got injured during the war. And he was somewhat of a bombastic type of guy, pushy, and he tried to take control. And but Owen was really a cagey, smart man. He said, to maintain control of his sloop as it was underway, he offered everybody equal shares, including Blackstock and the two other people that were with him, so that everybody would pay allegiance to him. And on board was a 14-year-old cabin boy, and he was from North Carolina, and he was going to get equal share. So anyway, they get to St. John's in the British Virgin Islands. They take on supplies, and then they leave. And just several miles away, there's this island, which is now in the British Virgin Islands, called Norman Island. He went there to divvy up the loot and ditch Blackstock. So people left the sloop and they went to various places. I don't know who saw what each other did, as far as burying, but most of the money was buried ashore. Some of it Lloyd and some of his partners kept, but they ditched Blackstock and the two other guys on the island. And the people from Tortola came over and saw Lloyd and said, "What's going on here?" "Oh, I sprung a leak. Got to fix the leak." And then we're moving on. So then he left, but they were suspicious. So when Lloyd left for St. Thomas, the guy from Tortola went ashore at Norman. It was uninhabited, and found the three guys, and they spilled the beans about the money. And then he took them back to Tortola. And next thing you know, everybody on Tortola knew about this buried treasure. And they were all over the island digging it up. and I don't know exactly how much was buried there, maybe 30 chests, but it was recovered, and then that created a free-for-all almost through the whole Caribbean. The word got to St. Kitts, and it got to Antigua, where the governor was, and he departed with soldiers and went back to Tortola and Norman to try to recover it. But Lloyd, he went to St. Thomas and applied to the governor for protection because that was sort of a pirate stronghold, and he knew it. And the governor said, yeah, you can live here. We'll take care of you as long as you bring your wife. So he said, I got to go back to St. Kitts and get her. And so he went to St. Kitts, and he comes ashore. And I got to back up and tell you, she came from a fairly prominent family, sugar plantation owner.
Okay.
Her father died, but her brother was running the plantation. And the remains of that plantation are still there today at St. Kitts, but it's in ruins. But very interesting thing to see. And so Lloyd comes ashore, and he's telling everybody, hey, man, look, I'm rich. We've got it made, because that's why she left him. He'd lost everything, back in Hampton because of the Spaniards. And I think he was thrown in jail for stealing right before she left. So now he's going to make it up to her, and then they say, hey, we already heard what you did. And it's amazing. The word traveled. The governor of North Carolina put out like an all-points bulletin because he knew he's headed for the Caribbean, and the word preceded him when he got to St. Kitts. So they said, you got to leave, and he said, all right, I'll go over to St. Eustatius, which was about 8 miles away. You can see it from the plantation. And it was Dutch control, and he and his other sailor friends went in there, and Lloyd and Zebulon Wade, who owned the sloop, and the cabin boy stayed aboard the sloop, the Seaflower, in the harbor. And the other men went ashore with some of their money and started buying drinks at the bar and not asking for change. The typical, drink them up, didn't care. And then the governor heard that these guys were free spending over at the tavern and realized it's probably those guys that stole the money. So he went down to the sloop and found Lloyd, Zebulon Wade, and Thomas Hobson, the cabin boy, and arrested them. So then what they did was they had a hearing, and he promised to take the governor to Norman Island and show him where the rest of the loot was, because they were going to hang him. And he got an agreement that if he could take him to the money, they'd spare his life. Well, he went to Norman and found there was no treasure left, a few coins laying around the ground. So they took him back, and on the way back to St. Eustatius, they came upon some of the other of Lloyd's crew that were headed to St. Eustatius, apparently, or St. Kitts, but they were intercepted, and they were arrested. So then all of these people were interrogated and condemned to death. But for Lloyd, one thing happened that's ended up giving him the time he needed. The governor had to send word back to the Netherlands to get permission because it was a capital case, and they couldn't just hang somebody like that without permission of the king.
Sure.
Word got back over to St. Kitts that he was going to hang, and they got money together, and I think his wife, we don't know, it's not in the record, got word to him what was going to happen, but he was able to persuade some of his guards to let him go, and the other guys, and they'd get some money. And I think he also promised them a share of the loot that they all knew that he had somewhere buried. And it was really an incredible escape, middle of the night. He had to pretend they were all asleep while the guard had unshackled them, and they pretended to still be locked up. At the right moment, they're out the door, down the wall, jumped over the wall, ran down the beach, waiting boat, went back to St. Kitts. So from there, he knew he was wanted, and he had to get to St. Thomas. So his wife, Christian, and him got what they had and sailed over to St. Thomas, where he holed up. Well, the word was all over the Caribbean about this, and back in Virginia, the Spanish captain, had gotten his galleon towed up to Suffolk, Virginia, where it was tied up and fixed. And the captain hired a merchant guy there as his attorney. And one of the Spaniards and a younger man from Suffolk left to go to the Caribbean to try to recover the captain's money. And when they did this, all these things I'm telling you are documented in the archives of Europe. We've made amazing discoveries on this. And so they went down there and applied to the governor at St. Thomas. He says, this guy hadn't done anything wrong. You can't have him. You have to leave. And they did, and they went to St. Eustatius. And the governor there had some money, and they got some of that away from him. And eventually the governor had to give it up after he died. And at St. Kitts, more money was found, and they rounded all this up and shipped it back to, first I think it was to England, to a coordinator or whatever there that was hired, and the money was sent back to Spain, where Captain Bonilla was his name, went back to Spain. He was pretty much ruined over this. Now, St. Kitts is sort of the center place of the recovery of the treasure, the story. Some of the money was circulated around St. Kitts, newly minted pieces of 8. This was certainly talked about for many years. Huh. In 1772, Robert Louis Stevenson's great-grandfather moved to St. Kitts. And he and his brother, it was Alan and Hugh Stevenson, got involved with something where somebody stole something from them, whatever. They supposedly had to chase some bad actor around the Caribbean in a small boat, and then they got sick, and ultimately they died. Hugh was buried in Tobago, and Alan was buried in St. Kitts. And Stevenson, when he wrote Treasure Island, this is the next part of the story. Mm-hmm. When he wrote Treasure Island, he was nobody, pretty much. Whatever he had, his dad helped him get published. Not that it wasn't really any good. He just had not arrived yet.
Sure.
So Stevenson he traveled around France, and he met this woman named Fanny Osborne, and she had left her husband, not divorced yet, and had 3 children. The husband was a prospector, philanderer, boozer that lived in San Francisco, and at the time, or I think maybe it was Nevada, because that's where he was working the mines. Mm. And she left him, and she was studying art, and Stevenson met her and fell in love with her. So Fanny agreed to get a divorce when she went back to California, and Stevenson went back to England, said, "I'll rendezvous with you." And so she went back, divorced the husband, and this was in San Francisco, and she went to Monterey and waited for him, and Stevenson went to New York, caught a train, and rendezvous with her in Monterey. It was about 1878 or 9. I get my years straight.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So this is, previous to the writing of Treasure Island. Now, what happened? I'm going to jump ahead to explain to you something.
Okay.
When he wrote Treasure Island, it was a rainy day. He was bored. His stepson was bored, and he decided that, we'll entertain him. But his stepson's name was Samuel Lloyd Osborne. But everybody called him Lloyd. And he was named after a John Lloyd from Wales, which is where John and Owen Lloyd were from. Mm. And, all of a sudden, I knew about this 30 years ago, and I said, this is getting to be too much of a coincidence here. And so anyway, little Lloyd Osborne started drawing a map, an island. And he says to Stevenson, tell me a story about it. So Stevenson takes the map and goes to his room, and he wrote the first chapter of Treasure Island. And they labeled it, and he went the next day and he read him the story. And that's how Treasure Island was written. Lloyd, his stepson, inspired him to write it. Now, what did little Lloyd know? We don't know. But we do know that in San Francisco, when they were living there, this John Lloyd, who apparently may have even had a physical affair with Fanny as well, but he was infatuated with her, and he was over there all the time telling stories to the kids and entertaining them. And there's even mention about this John Lloyd, and it may be fantasy, may be true, that he went in search of his two brothers that went off to sea and never came home. And this is documented. Now, the time difference between Owen and John Lloyd and Treasure Island is over 100 years.
Right.
Difference. But one of the things that this may seem like it's just a bunch of coincidences, but I've learned in this business, when it's a coincidence, it's probably not. Okay? But we go back to Norman Island. The treasure was buried on November 13th, 1750.
Uh-huh.
Exactly 100 years to the day Robert Louis Stevenson was born, and he'd be the one to write a story about going back to that island to recover the treasure. Because that's what the story of Treasure Island is. It's
Sure.
not about stealing, it's about going back to uncover it. So, anyway, Stevenson's in Monterey. He meets Sam, Fanny's husband, and he also met John Lloyd while he was in San Francisco. We don't know what was said between them, but we know that's what happened. So in 1879-80, Stevenson returns to Scotland. Still no success. He's living off Daddy's money. And it was in 1881 that they had this opportunity or whatever when he's told the story, and that's where it began. That's how Treasure Island was written. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'll tell you that the story, it's easily told in this telephone conversation, but it took me a span of 10 years to get it. And I had researchers in Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, and England. I personally did research here in North Carolina and Virginia, which wasn't much available, but it was important, the clues that I found.
Sure.
Particularly, I found out who Owen Lloyd was. I've got the deed to his house now. But
really?
The researchers in England, each one independently told me this is the most amazing story they've ever worked on, whether it was genealogy or history or whatever. So it was a great experience, fun to talk to them on the phone and, share their comments and their excitement, of finding these records. And, of course, I found a great deal myself in various places. And, I could find a clue here, and that clue would help somebody over in Europe, because without that clue, they wouldn't have done what they did. So
that's really interesting.
Effort.
What kind of sources and things were they using or using to find out this information?
Well, to sum up what they found, most of what they found was inspired and transcribed, written down by the governments in each island. The Netherlands owned St. Eustatius, the England owned St. Kitts.
Uh-huh.
The Danish owned what is now the American Virgin Islands, St. Thomas and St. John's.
Uh-huh.
And the British owned Norman Island and Tortola. So the records of these events were written down pretty much about recovering the treasure, but testimony was taken to explain who did what, when, that sort of thing. And it's letters, it's depositions, and so forth. And those are recorded in each country's archives. They're stored, and then we found them.
Huh, interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, in the case of Denmark, I had this guy working for months, sending him money. I says, I can't find anything, maybe a little reference here and there to stuff. And he ended up going and looking in a box that was dated about 10 years later than the event, and he found everything. So what happened was that there was a hearing about 10 years later where Captain Bonilla was trying to get his money back from Denmark because it had been taken by the Danish governor in St. Thomas. And that investigation and so forth was 10 years later. So the records were dated that way, but all the records in the box were back to 1750-51. So that was a very chance discovery. And then as far as St. Eustatius, I said, well, they've got to have something. I sent email inquiries to the archives, and I said, do you have anything from St. Eustatius, 1750? And they wrote back, no, we don't have anything. He said, the British captured the island. They burn it up. They even use the records for toilet paper. We don't have anything. And then I said, oh, geez, I've lost that opportunity. And maybe a month or two later, the light bulb went off. So wait a minute. They would have reported this event back to headquarters in the Netherlands. So that sent these people in a different direction. And I get an email back. He says, yeah, we've got all this stuff. It's about 100 pages. We got Owen Lloyd's deposition. It explains everything. It was all written in Dutch. So I had to hire. Said we can't do the translation for you, but you find somebody. And I found a woman in England who was a professional Dutch translator, and she took care of it. So I had all this stuff together. And of course, we went to St. Kitts, and this is interesting because the family that Owen married into was named Keynes. Okay, my wife and I went there in 2002 to see St. Kitts, take pictures, and hopefully do a research. And I let the woman know ahead of time I was coming. So when I got there, she says, "Okay, what are you looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for anything on the Lloyd family or the Keynes family." And then she says, "Well, we got plenty on the Keynes family because that today is a prominent family, name anyway, all around the island. But Lloyd," she says, "you're not going to find anything on Lloyd." And I said, "All right, well, give me the index book for 1750, 51, whatever." And she got it. Within 3 minutes, I found a transaction from Lloyd to Keynes. That's all it said, Lloyd to Keynes. So she went and got the books, and the book was so fragile. The spine was broken. You open the cover off, and the pages are falling apart. And she said, "I don't know if I should let you do this, but you came all the way from North Carolina. I'll let you open it up." So we were careful. And there it was. It was what they call a release. It was stuff where Owen Lloyd was trying to get money collected, and his cousin Thomas Keynes was going to do it. And there were a couple other documents, but valuable, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And then later, I found we're going to take your listeners back to St. Thomas, and we're going to talk about what happened to Owen and John. We'll get rid of John first. Well, as I said, he escaped, and he went back to Norfolk, and that's where his wife was. And he had bought some land in North Carolina, 150 acres on the Pasquotank River. For anybody that knows where that is, North Carolina, it's next to Elizabeth City. And he was hoping, I think, to retire there, but then he got involved with his brother, and that changed that. But he wasn't a wanted man. He actually served on the jury in Norfolk after this, so he wasn't in any kind of trouble. But there was a mysterious thing that we found, that John went back to England. And going back to England, we found something else. The Lloyd brothers had an uncle in the British Navy who ran the Greenwich Hospital, which is the Naval Observatory today.
Okay.
And that was a hospital back then, and they let old sailors, retire there, military. So he went back to England in 1753. And I had my researcher in England, look, we got to find this guy. And I didn't know where he went or whatever, but they poured through these documents and found a John Lloyd that was missing a leg in the Admiralty records. And they cautioned me. He said, look, a lot of people lost arms and legs, and Lloyd is a very common name. So don't get too excited. But I was excited anyway. But we kept looking, and all of a sudden, everything clicked. We got everything fit. John's uncle ran the hospital, and he went over there and got permission to move in. And we know that. And that's where he died, like 10 years later. Huh. Or 1759, I think, is when he died. But we have the will of his uncle when he died and what he gave to John, and it was a little monthly allowance. I think we know, because being a monthly allowance, we know that he probably would drink it up if he was given the whole bit at one time. So he was put on an allowance. Now, there was no mention of Owen, and we know this. We go back to St. Thomas. He was being protected by the governor, and he had to pay money. We know this, and from other records, that he bought a house supposedly, or money was exchanged and so forth for protection. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a weird story here. This is where I make connections. Okay. I had an experience with a psychic that got involved in a shipwreck project with me in 1983. I didn't invite him in, but my partner, who was a lawyer, it was his client. He said, this guy's good. But I got back up, 83. 82, he told my partner, he goes, this ship you're looking for is not in the ocean. It's buried in this shallow water area on Assateague Island. I laughed. I said, Albert, don't bother me with this stuff. Not that I didn't believe in people like that, but most of them, are a hoax.
Sure.
Con men.
Yeah.
And then I came to the conclusion the next year that he was absolutely correct. And then I told my partner, I said, let's get him over to Assateague. And he did some amazing things. He actually put me right over where the wreck would be, and we found magnetic debris, whatever. So anyway, I was convinced of this guy. So that deal is part of how I got into this Treasure Island thing, because that ship was with the Guadalupe in 1750. Uh-huh. So now, that being said, I'm writing the book, and I found out who Owen Lloyd was. I found out all the crewmen from records over in the Netherlands. I knew what happened to everybody. They came back home or wherever they went. I knew everything but what happened to Owen Lloyd. And I'm like, you know what? I need to talk to a psychic. I don't know where else to go. So one night, I went to bed early, said good night to my wife, went to bed. She stayed up watching TV, then she went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I went back downstairs. I turned on the tube. Whatever channel she had is what I was watching. And it was I think it was a biography channel, whatever, but it was about a woman who found out that she was psychic because she had a dream and witnessed a murder. And she thought it was her own murder. And then when she woke up, she said, well, it's not me, but I know where the body is, or something like that. And went to the police, and they found the body. And this woman ended up getting her own TV show on the Discovery Channel. Mm. So that's what I was watching. And I said, now that's somebody that's got some ability. Well, I got in touch with her, and then she says, look, I don't know if I can help you. This is a long time ago. And, I said, I don't care. Let's give it a shot. It wasn't going to cost me much money. So I'm on the phone here in North Carolina, and she's out in California. I said, well, what do I do? She said, just start talking. Just tell me about it. So anyway, she told me some amazing things. And then she said that Owen was shot, and maybe his brother was nearby. There was somebody with a wooden leg. And There was some other details. I talk about it in the book. But anyway, I said, well, how can I prove this? And there was some Danish records that I gotten through the Mormon Church. I don't know if you're aware that they do a lot of genealogical stuff,
Sure.
records that they store. And we had a church here, and I said, well, I'd been working with some of the records, and I ordered up this microfilm. In fact, I'd seen the microfilm before. It's written in Old Danish. The records it was very difficult to read it. Even if it was English, I couldn't read it because that messed up. So anyway, I ordered that microfilm again, put it on a machine, and I started 1750, nothing. I just basically all I could do is look for dates. And then I found 1752, and then I picked up an O, and I looked at it closely, or Lloyd, and I said, that's Owen Lloyd. That's his name. So I copied the document, and it was in negative format, not positive, negative format.
Uh-huh.
I took it home, put it on my scanner, scanned it in the computer, reversed it to positive. I cleaned it up. And not only do I see Owen Lloyd, I see Christian Keynes, his wife, and then I see dates, December something, 1752. Then I sent it to be translated over in Denmark. And what it was is that Owen had died in December of 1752, and this was a marriage announcement for Christian who was marrying a prominent person at St. Thomas. The researchers there said, well, if he would have been buried at St. Thomas, which he would have been if he died there, they probably would have been in those church records, and it wasn't. She said he died at St. Croix. Now, we also know that Owen had stopped at St. Croix before he got to St. Kitts, and we think he left some money there, and that was basically where his bank was. So when he needed to keep paying the governor, he'd leave and go over to St. Croix. And I think that money ran out, and somebody went with him. There was no money left, and he was shot and done with. And that's how he ended up. We know he's dead. And that's how I found out.
That's crazy.
So,
now, yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Now, how did you get into this story, and how did you decide that this was something that you wanted to spend time with?
In 1978, I was scuba diving, looking for wrecks, artifacts, and stuff with a high school buddy. And I moved from Richmond to Washington because of a new job. And I said, look, told Greg, I said, I'm going to go to the archives and the Library of Congress and start researching stuff and see what we can find. We'll do some diving. Good. I was at the National Archives one night. My goal was to catalog any and everything I could find in Virginia that would be of interest, having come from Richmond, the center part of the state.
Uh-huh.
But I was in the archives that night and waiting on some records to be delivered, and in front of me was a shelf of books, bound volumes of the Archives of Maryland. And these were published printed documents that had been, transcribed from the originals, index, and so forth for research purposes. So I said, well, while I'm waiting, let's see what this is all about. And my main question were they indexed, how well they were indexed for research purposes. So out of, say, 50 books that were on the shelf, I pulled one. I looked under shipwreck, and there was this thing about Spanish shipwreck. And I went to the reference page, and there it was, a letter from the Spanish captain about his ship that ran ashore on Assateague Island. And I said, what happened was when he ran ashore, he thought he was in Virginia, and then after a survey, he found out he was 2 ship lengths inside of Maryland. I said, anybody could find this shipwreck. You just got to find out where this state line is, the colonial boundary line is, and how much could it have moved. Well, to sum it up, it only moved 2 miles.
Wow.
And if the ship ran ashore in shallow water, didn't sink, we know it's within 100, 200 yards of the beach, all right? With just a 20-foot boat, a good day of weather, full day in the summertime, and a good magnetometer, you could survey an entire area in one day, all right? But we went out and looked for it. We couldn't find it, and anyway, there was another treasure hunting group that was started, and I knew they were going to go look for it. And Greg, my partner, said he couldn't keep up with it. He's married, and I'm single, so he bowed out at the end of the summer. So I joined up with this other group because I knew they were looking for La Galga, and there were other ships they were talking about with millions in treasure and all that. But I knew from my research in Spain, La Galga wasn't supposed to be carrying a lot of money. To me, it was just history and some adventure, go find this ship. And I'm going to make this a little shorter. You understand the significance. This was not a treasure ship.
Okay.
But what I did find out, that it was the ship that brought the wild ponies to Assateague Island, for people who are familiar about that, the Chincoteague ponies, that even today, there's a big celebration every year. They round them up, swim them, they auction the young ones off, and all of that. But anyway, I joined this group. This other group was run by a con man, and I didn't know it. So he misled everybody and what was on the ship about other ships, and I soon found out what he was and exposed him. We had him in court, and we kind of got rid of him, and that was it. But a handful of guys came to me and said, look, you know what you're doing? Let's go back and find La Galga, the one that ran ashore at Assateague. And while I was researching La Galga, I read about, the other ships of the fleet, which you would, when you're dealing with the same documents. And when I read about John Lloyd and the wooden leg, and this happened in 1750, I'm like, this is starting to ring a bell at that point. So I got Treasure Island out, and you open it up, and there's the map of Treasure Island, and it says the treasure's buried August 1st, 1750. And I said, well, wait a minute, that's the year this happened. And this was a year, piracy was pretty much over by 1720-something.
Sure.
Blackbeard was dead. All these other people were dead. You're a pirate guy. You know that.
Yeah.
1750 was over. And we can talk a little bit more about Stevenson at this point. He studied that. He read a book, Johnson's book on pirates. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. I've read it.
Yeah. Well, he read that book when he was writing Treasure Island. And those pirates were all in the 1720s, 1715, 18, that sort of thing. So although some of the things in there he may have used, he did not use the date. Now, why didn't he? In fact, in Stevenson, in Treasure Island, the only date in there is on the map. He always puts a dash where there's a date. He doesn't tell you the date. And it was his father who dated the map. Lloyd Osborne's map, that was the inspiration. He had that, and his intent was to put that in the book, but it was misplaced by the publisher, and they said, well, you got to draw us another map. So he drew another map with the help of his father, and his father labeled it, and he's the one that put 1750 on it. Now, his father, when he was a kid, his father, or his grandfather, was still alive, that could easily have told things about St. Kitts. He would have heard it about what happened with Lloyd. And we don't know what was said, but it seems like Stevenson was destined to write the story, and he may have heard it in more than one place, from his father and from possibly a ancestor or a relative of Owen Lloyd out in California. Now, it's funny that you call me now because I published the book in 2011. It was becoming costly and time-consuming to trace out some of these leads. The book needed to go to press. We needed to get moving. But between me and my researcher, we said, you know what? We know there's going to be a link. And I told her, I said, we will get back to this another day, hopefully soon, but it's been 4 years. But I just talked to her last week, and I said, it's time for us to do this. And I sent her an email today. Give me an estimate. We know what our game plan is. I need to know what it's going to cost us. Let me know, and I think we can get started. And that's where we are.
That's what a wild story. That is really fascinating. And so the book is called Treasure Island, The Untold Story, right?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct.
And I'm going to make sure to link that up in the show notes, and the website is treasureislandtheuntoldstory.com.
Right. If I can,
yeah.
Phil, you can edit it out if you want. But anyway, if you tell people to go to the Hidden Galleon website,
okay,
that is an all-inclusive documentary of everything we've talked about. You know,
okay.
the one ship, the other. They'll get a lot out of it. Now, we can go into another subject here. You know this. A lot of people may not, but I think most people do. Pirates of the Caribbean owes its existence to Robert Louis Stevenson.
Of course.
Disney, you know that. But Disney made the Treasure Island movie in 1950.
Uh-huh.
It was a color version, and it was the first non-animated film that Disney had made. And it was a huge success. People loved it, loved the story. And that inspired Disney later to do the amusement park ride, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't just use, the Treasure Island thing. He kind of took in Blackbeard, the whole thing. But it was Stevenson who inspired this. And what inspired Stevenson is what happened right here in North Carolina, where I live, at Ocracoke Inlet.
Sure.
So you have a true story that most people, very few people today know about it because, I'm selling books and all that. But until you read it, you don't know it. And I did have a guy over in England that approached me. He says, look, this is a great story. I'd like to do a documentary on it. But I think he's having trouble finding money. He's not that big of a producer. Mm. But I predict there will be people that are going to be stepping forward, and we may well see something the next couple of years.
That's great. Well, you never know who's listening to this. I have a lot of interesting people that listen. So
yeah, exactly. So we're certainly open to discussions on that.
Good to know. Well, John, this has been really fun. I'm going to make sure to link up both the websites, all that stuff in the show notes there, and I think everybody's going to really enjoy this story. So it was really great talking to you, man.
Thank you, Phil.
Let's talk again soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. All right.
Now, is that a story or is that a story? Oh my gosh. Right? Like, what did I say? I only said like 3 things in that whole interview, but it was great. It was so interesting to listen to. So I hope you like that. If you want to find out more about John's books, go to treasureislandtheuntoldstory.com. And you can find John Amrhein's books right there. And bonus, if you want to pick it up for your Kindle from Amazon, it's just $2.99 through December 2015. So if you're listening after December 2015, you can pay whatever the full price is. But if you're listening in December 2015, you can get Treasure Island: The Untold Story for just $2.99 on Kindle through Amazon. I'll link that up on the show notes as well. So you make sure you can just come to underthecrossbones.com/018 and it'll be all linked up from there. All right, so we got some music today. We got some comedy. First, we're going to hear comedy from Carlos Rodriguez, who's a buddy of mine from Sacramento, California, and he's going to do a bit about, he works for the government. That's his day job. So he's going to do a bit about calling in sick to work. Very funny. I think you'll dig it. I think he recorded it at the Sacramento Punchline, if I remember right. And then we're going to hear some music. We're going to hear a song called May Our Love Live On from Moon and 42 from Nashville. And the male singer of Moon and 42 is my buddy Nick Pagliari from way back in the day. And I think you're going to really dig that too. All right, let's get into it. Comedy and music. Comedy from Carlos Rodriguez, music from Moon and 42.
Things I like and I don't like, but like for work for the state, I like that you don't have to call in anymore sick. You can email that shit in. Yes. Yeah, it's like getting away with murder. It's like you don't have to like pretend not to talk anymore. You know, don't use your wake up voice. Like, okay, Mom, I can't come in. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've fucked up telephones like that. But I email in, you can do that shit. You can be like, I'm not coming in tonight. Stand. Yeah. But I'm a bitch, right? Like I said before, so I'd be coughing in parentheses. And shit, man. You guys got me feeling all good right now. I'm thinking about calling in and shit. I'm all checking my timer now. I got a couple hours I can fucking wake up. Don't you love that feeling when all of a sudden when you decide you're gonna call in, you're just like, I don't know if yes, I am. It's going down. Let's drink right now. Wednesday. Like, it's stupid. I like that shit, man. Craziness. Yeah, man, it's crazy. But I'm not gonna call it tomorrow. Fuck that, we got a potluck. Only time I eat. It's hard out here for a pimp, homie. I'm with a plate and shit, with a real plate too. Ain't no paper plate. I got one home right here. Put a special on me, stingy. No, it's not. They got mad at me one time. They were like, Carlos, you need to start bringing stuff to the potluck. I was like, I'm brought an appetite. Shut up. I was like, all right, fuck it, I'll bring some. So I went to the bathroom. I got toilet paper. I was like, boom, napkins. Shut your face.
You got the butter, I got the dough. Let's make an angel in the snow. I wanna know you like no one's ever known.
I got the engine, you got the drive. Let's have a cheap beer at the dive. I wanna make big plans for you and I.
Spin the record and sing our song. What started new has grown strong. After our bodies are dead and gone, may our love live on. Got the pistol, I got the aim. Let's plant a garden in the rain. I wanna skip all those petty love games.
I got the honey, you got the bee. Let's come together naturally. I want the whole damn world to see
And that's our show for today, friends. Remember, you can get all the show notes and links to all the stuff I mentioned at underthecrossbones.com/018. Keep listening. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends. I love the iTunes reviews. Thank you very much for putting those up. Keep putting up iTunes reviews. Those help immensely. And that's it. I'll be back next week with some more great pirate talk and comedy and music and everything. Thanks for listening to Under the Crossbones.